Scott Mosley here, also known as Scotty P. I am coming to you with my first podcast snippet, more of an introduction of what's to come. Imperfection Wellness is something that I've been working on. It is wellness to the perfectly imperfect. And I got stuck in my head, meaning I associated with my thoughts all the time. A lot of my thoughts were very negative. I thought I was my thoughts. I thought, well, if that's how I feel, then that's how I am, and that's who I am. So when I had that moment when I'd look in the mirror and I'd see something ugly, some body dysmorphia, the imperfection of my body, other things that would come up, and I would associate with those thoughts. Yes, there were many moments of bliss. And when I was in those blissful moments, those thoughts would be on the sidelines. That's your ego. And those egoic thoughts sitting on the sideline, as soon as I got back home or was by myself, they would rush in and I would associate with them, almost like a fish hook. They caught me. And so what I'm doing with Imperfection Wellness is really finding a way to talk openly about mental health. I do believe mental health is a human right. I do believe it should be a free resource. I am trained as a physician assistant. I am not a mental health professional. And so if you are suffering and you're under the care of a mental health professional and you're on medication, continue that. If you're, seriously struggling, reach out to a mental health provider, reach out to a suicide hotline, talk to somebody, say, I need help. In this digital era, there's help everywhere. So this is not to replace that. This is a tool in the toolbox, a resource that is there to help you on those days. And all the tips and tricks that I'm going to be talking about, they are things that I have used, and they are things that have helped me. And there are good days and bad days still. I used to think for the longest time that I was broken. How am I broken? How was I born broken? And I guess that's what I'll deal with. I knew I had a lot of privilege. I knew I had resources, and I wasn't going to complain to anybody because I felt like crap that I knew how lucky I was. I was able to get an education. I was able to get a good job. I was able to be compensated for my hard work. How could I be unhappy? What's wrong with me? I can't complain to anyone. I'll look like a fool. And I always used to joke, I'd look at a bag of gold coins and all I could see was that they were tarnished. Now, told my cousin that story and she's like, well, gold doesn't tarnish. And I started laughing. I said, well, I guess my analogy's ruined. But that analogy held true for the longest time, that I saw my bag of riches and I always saw the tarnish. I couldn't feel it. I knew I had it, but I didn't feel it. And that's what I want to talk about on this podcast, Imperfection Wellness. Any topic on wellness is going to be covered here, but there's definitely some basics. And I hope you'll join me on this journey, being perfectly imperfect, finding that happiness from within. Those externals, they come and go, whether that's your wedding day, whether that's that job promotion, whether that's that trip. These externals are great, and yes, they bring some happy moments, but true happiness comes from within. And I always hated hearing that because I didn't feel it, and no one gave me a playbook. Well, I'm creating a playbook. I'm actually creating a playbook on how to feel from within that happiness. How do I see those thoughts as separate from me? I used to say I am not my thoughts, but that's a negative and your brain doesn't always process it. So I say I am separate from my thoughts. And we have 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. So when those 60 to 80,000 thoughts, maybe more, maybe less, are constantly berating us, and I associated with them and I believed them, I went into some bad places. I used to try to numb it. I used to try to make it go away. I was always the life of the party as long as I had a few drinks in me. And proud to say my last drink was January 13th, 2023. I never thought of myself as an alcoholic. I don't think I was an alcoholic, but I was going down a very bad road, a very bad path. We're going to talk about that in a future episode. But just know, thankfully, through some interventions, I was able to quit drinking. I was able to quit drinking quite easily, which is why I don't associate as an alcoholic, but my behaviors were that of binge drinking and drinking to numb, and I think I was coming close. Again, if you're using drugs or alcohol to numb or to feel, I get it. If it's an addiction, I don't get it. I have respect and reverence for those who are in recovery and done the work. That is a different journey, one that I have not been on. Again, there are so many resources in post-pandemic. These resources are virtual, easily accessible, and free. Free from your smartphone, free from your computer. I was also told by a friend of mine to be real. And in being real, I'm going to make mistakes. Realness means being human. Humans are fallible. Humans make mistakes. We want to think that we're invincible. We want to think that we're infallible, but in fact, we are not. I'm looking at the clock, it's 6 minutes in, and I'm happy with what I've said, but I know there are going to be times throughout this podcast where I'm going to either make a mistake, say the wrong thing, and in a cancel culture, that's on my mind. What I want us to commit to is it's okay to be fallible. It's okay when I make mistakes. It's okay when we make mistakes. Are there things in my past that if they came out, I'd be mortified? Absolutely. There are things I'm not proud of, but I don't want to bring shame to that, because shame is yet another layer that we put on ourselves that takes us from a more positive mindset to a less positive. We're also going to talk about qualifiers, good and bad, better, worse. That's going to be another topic we talk about. So I try to talk in different terms, more favorable versus less favorable. Is this in alignment with my true spirit, what I want to do, or is this not in alignment? That framework and phrasing really does make an impact on how I feel. And I know that I'm not unlike many of you. So again, we are fallible. We make mistakes. We're going to be okay with that. And our past is our past. I am turning the page. Today is June 2nd, 2023. I had the opportunity to leave my job and take some time off to create this program, this paradigm, as I'm calling it, that we're going to be talking through on this podcast. The paradigm is going to be available sooner than later. It's called the Posley Paradigm, P squared. I love my alliterations. And so the Posley Paradigm is our way, and I say our because it's going to be an available resource to you, our way of getting unstuck from our thoughts, separating from those thoughts. And I think we have a lot of content out there that talks about happiness, that talks about getting unstuck. But I think some of that content is what I now frame as toxic positivity. I'm not knocking positivity. I do think we're going to talk through gratitude exercises. We're going to talk through positive experiences. But the toxic positivity of smile and you'll feel better. Think as if and you'll feel better. And I didn't. And with toxic positivity, I said, well, how come it's working for so many people? How come they just grin and bear it and show up and they're better? What's wrong with me? And yet again, it brought shame and it made me think that I was broken. I'll never forget a couple years back, and I called a friend of mine, dear friend, Gary, and I said, well, I've been pretty much depressed for the last 35 to 40 years. I'm passively suicidal. I'm drinking to cope. And I guess this is just my lot in life. I guess this is just who I am. I guess I know I'm blessed. I know I have resources that others don't. And so I'm not complaining, but I guess I'm kind of broke. I guess, it's like a chronic cancer. There are certain things you just can't treat. And I guess mine is mental illness. And I was brought up Catholic, so I kind of called that my cross to bear. And I made myself a martyr and a victim. And I didn't realize I was doing that. And I look back on that moment and I said, I guess it's just going to be day by day and I'll do the best that I can, but this sucks. Because I know what I have and I want to enjoy it and feel it. and to know you have something and to feel you have something are drastically different. So Terry and I talked for a little bit, and she's always been a great resource. Her name's going to come up quite a bit, or at least another couple of times in this podcast, and hopefully I'll have her on at some point. Terry and I grew up in the same small town or the same area, and grew up with very unique situations, but similarities that have kept us together in a dear bond that and if you ever hear me take that deep breath, that means some emotions popping up. Oh, and I said I'd be real, and I said I don't want to over-edit. There were some really dark moments, and Terry was there, so we're going to talk through that. And one of many experiences that helped me kind of go from a very dark place to a less dark place. And again, everyone is going to be coming to the table listening to this with different traumas, different perspectives, and my goal is not to rate them as good or bad. I know my journey being a gay man has caused me traumas that are very different from other people's traumas. And mine, when you rate them, are on the lesser scale, but they were my reality. So let's not rate traumas. I do bring privilege into this talk. I didn't fully understand my privilege for the longest time, even though I'm gay as a white man. I know privilege comes along with that. I also know being tall and having a deep voice brings its own privilege. And so just from the last 12 minutes, the topics we've covered, I believe, all tie into our wellness. And you're all going to bring your variables to the table when you listen to this. A lot of it's going to resonate, but just as much won't. But my goal is that we start talking about this so we can heal ourselves, but also start healing the young. We need to change. I want to change. I shouldn't say we. I want to change how I interact and or think and or support other people. I think in a cancel culture, toxic culture, anonymous comments or commenting behind a computer and a username hurt people, hurt people. And I remember hearing that years ago. And instead of critiquing that, I want to create a safe space where haters or cancel culture people can look to themselves and maybe see their trauma and how do we support them. That's going to be a journey. And at my last job, I would talk to my team and I'd say, how do you solve for world hunger? You feed a family. And if you can't feed a family, you feed a member of the family. So what I'm embarking on is solving for world hunger. And it's not going to happen overnight. Probably won't happen in my lifetime, but it doesn't stop me from putting forward this information which is going to have you feel empowered, have you realize I'm accepting present moment, as scary as that is, as scary as present moment is, because at times it can be scary, at other times it's perfectly wonderful. But what happens when my present moment turns to the anxiety I have of the future, or the sadness I have about yesterday, or the sadness I have believing my present moment is horrible? So with that, I'll close on my first introduction podcast. And thank you for listening. And I really look forward to having you check back in weekly or bi-weekly as we continue this journey. A lot of times it will be solo, but other times I plan on bringing people in. And I really hope you enjoy this. Please reach out to me with questions and comments. I have an email address on beingimperfect@gmail.com. Again, on beingimperfect@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. What questions, comments, or thoughts do you have? Topics you want to talk about? And just remember, throughout this journey we're on, at any time, reach out and give some feedback, as this is a journey I've been on for probably 35, 40 years. I just turned 49. I think there were some early naive years that were very blissful. And then at a very young age, when the bullying started, that started changing who I was and how I associated with my thoughts. So as we look over this, again, it's going to be coming through my lens, but I would love it to come through our lens, as what I'm about to talk about in the coming weeks, months, and years is stuff that I do each and every day to redirect how I associate with my thoughts and how to feel what I have, which brings happiness internally. Yes, there are still externals I look to that I wish I had, that I know will bring happier moments, but the authentic happiness still comes from within. And so you may have a version of that you want to talk about, and I'd love to hear from you. So again, thanks for listening. Imperfection Wellness, also on the web, imperfectionwellness.com. And again, the goal of many resources, all being free or low cost or at cost, and a journey that we're going to be on together. Thank you. Be well.